open up the floor. First off, if questions for the about the presentation, then we'll move on to the any other questions out there.
Okay, yeah. Let me unmute everybody first. Right now, they can't unmute themselves.
Okay.
But before we do that, there's a couple of questions that were asked during your presentation. Marty Crowley asked one about using queen excluders. He left the meeting. He had somewhere to go, so I can get back with him on that.
Okay.
But he basically asked what were people's thoughts about using a queen excluder. I'll start with my answer. I believe a queen excluder should be used as a tool, not as a cage. In other words, maybe 1 out of 5 hives of mine, the queen might decide to wander around. I put the queen excluder on 4 weeks or 28 days before I process honey. And that last egg she may have laid will have emerged out. So I won't have any little white worm juice in my honey because they will have all emerged as bees by then. But I just force the queen down into the bottom box at the beginning of August, and I process my honey at the beginning of September. And again, I use it as a tool, not as a cage. I just don't slap one on there. There's a big debate as whether whether it will prevent the foragers from going up and manipulating the honey and slow them down. So I don't even enter that argument because I don't put one there. So that's my opinion.
So I'll give you my opinion is I use them as a tool as well. I use them for part of the year and not the whole year. So I use them at the beginning of the spring when I first put that honey super on there until there's enough honey in there. And then I don't think the queen will normally cross that honey boundary. And I'm happy to take that queen excluder out there. I do think it slows the workers down a little bit in terms of working their way from the bottom to the top of the hive to store honey. So I just don't like to keep it on there any longer than I have to, but I use it when I think it's necessary. And clearly I use it for certain operations like some of those things we talked about here. But again, once my hive's in normal operation, I use it just for a short time. And then when I don't think I have to worry about it, I take it off.
Okay, so anybody else can comment just by unmuting yourself. Patty, I see you've got your hand up. Here, I'll unmute Patty. Okay, go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, it was not allowing me to unmute myself.
Okay.
As far as the queen excluder, if you have a hive that looks like it's getting ready to swarm, what about using, instead of clipping a queen's wing, using a queen excluder under, just above the entrance to keep the queen in the hive and keep from swarming? Any thoughts on that, number one?
So that causes some problems because the queen is still going to signal a swarm and the bees are going to take off. And so you'll have 30,000 bees flying around waiting to fly away with the queen, and she's not going to show up.
Well, I think I agree with a lot of what Mike said, but there's another problem, right? So I didn't talk about it in here, but when the hive starts to prepare to swarm, they stop feeding that queen, so she skinnies down so that she gets lighter and is able to fly again. So when she does that, she may go through that queen excluder. And so the queen excluder is designed to prevent her from crossing when she's fat and full of eggs and being well fed. So I think in the preparation for swarming, as she gets skinnier and stops eating and she shrinks down, she may slip through that queen excluder anyway.
I'd like to mention one other thing. So as they prepare for swarming, now you've got a bunch of capped swarm cells in your hive with your queen.
Yeah.
So they're going to start emerging potentially. So now you may have some virgin queens out there that may attack your existing queen or vice versa. Just a lot of controversy that maybe isn't good for the overall productivity of your hive.
Okay.
But I don't think I'd try it.
Just something I was curious about and didn't know one way or the other. The other thing is in your presentation, you said one thing you wanted to avoid if you reverse the hive boxes with splitting the brood.
Right.
I thought that was kind of the intention because, even though we make square boxes, they basically raise the brood in a ball type shape. And so you're taking that ball, splitting it in half and reversing the ball.
No, I think you're right about how you described it, but I don't think you don't want to split that ball because I'm trying to think of the reasons why you don't want to do that, but I know it's bad to do that. Brad or Mike, you want to comment on why it's bad to do that?
Yeah. So in the when it's colder out in the morning, in the nighttime, when you split them up, the brood's going to ball back up to try and protect the brood, and they won't be able to protect the bottom of one box and the top of the other box. So you don't want to break up the point where they're going to cluster around the brood. When you split it up, again, half the basketball goes there and the other half goes down there of the brood. And then where does the cluster go? So.
Okay, I see what you mean there. So when it's warmer, it's not so bad, but to try and split it like that, because I used to quarter mine. Not only would I swap the top and bottom boxes, but I'd swap the left and right half of frames to prevent swarming, and never had a problem with it. But the weather was fairly warm when I did that.
Okay. Hey,
Okay,
I'm
so
just
next question from Gene Cushion. He thanks you for your excellent presentation, Brad. He asks if anybody uses the Ternoff Shook method. I do use that, but I'll let other people comment first. Okay, so not hearing any other comments on that. I've used it a couple of times. One time it didn't go as well as I expected. You know, you watch the guy on YouTube and his just happens, and over an hour, everything just occurs.
Yeah.
First time I did it, and I don't know why, but it finally did its thing. It just took forever. The second time it worked better, but the general idea is you're trying to separate the queen who walks up that board and the nurse bees who have not flown before. They're just going to walk to the top of the board and they're going to go up under the board. And that ball is exactly what a swarm is. It's the old queen and hopefully about 50% of the hive, which is mostly
the young bees.
Nurse bees. And all the foragers have flown before. They're going to go back to the original hive spot and they're going to repopulate the original hive. So you create an artificial swarm by doing that. In some of the documentation, they say you need to be, you know, they say, in fact, in Brad Sumter's presentation, 100 millimeters away from the hive. It really doesn't matter if, you know, if you're within a mile, you can do the Ternoff method. Now, you're not going to want to walk back and forth that far, but if you've got multiple hives, you may actually want to kick the Ternoff method off 3 or 4 times if you've got a whole series of hives that you're trying to prevent from swarming. Just kick, you know, do one, get the next one started, the next one, come back, rotate around to the front. So that's something to consider.
So I'm looking in the chat. There was one to me privately, but ask how old is a queen when they're considered old? So a queen can live maybe 3 to 4 years. I think ideally requeening it probably every 2 years is the best. And I'm thinking about, for myself, honestly, trying to maybe start requeening most of my queens every year.
Mike, there's some more questions in the chat if you scroll up too.
Yeah. Another question out there is, will this presentation be saved or available somewhere? Yes, it is. I know there's like 1 billion Facebook users, and I even have an account, but I can't seem to get in it. Facebook's smarter than me. But Brad Price was kind enough to post a copy out there and mentioned it in Facebook. But we can send that link out to everybody again, where you can find a copy of the presentation.
Yep, and then we'll also send a link to where this recording is on located also, so people can listen to the recording of the video chat.
There was another question early on from C. Bishop. I don't know if we addressed hers or not.
I'm just reading that now.
I guess that was more on the there's the single versus 2 brood boxes. Either one of you guys want to chat on that?
So yeah, and I know Brad Price has definitely made some good presentations to our Bee Club about overwintering your hives and all the different types of things he does in terms of insulation and moisture prevention and feeding. And so with all that stuff, I think overwintering two hives is fine. A 2 brood box hive is fine. There's other things you can do too to like using that Snellgrove board to stack a hive on top of each other so they're sharing that heat. The heat from the bottom hive goes up to the other hive to protect it. I think that's another case where it depends on the hive and depends on the beekeeper and what other management techniques that you're employing, whether you're overwinter a single deep or a two deep hive. I mean, I've been overwintering two deep hives and haven't had any problems, but there are good reasons to do it down to one. If there's not that many bees in there, it will help compress them. But I've had good luck with two deep brood boxes.
So what I forgot, I didn't mention, Brad, that she kind of had a two-part question. The last part was, is there a case to have one brood box versus having two to produce the best results making honey?
Yeah, I didn't talk about the honey part. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't see that helps you at all. There is an interesting YouTube video. There's a young guy out in Canada. His name's Devin Ron, and he manages a lot of his colonies with the queen just down in a single brood box. But I don't know that it really helps you as far as making honey, and I prefer to have two myself. But I would watch DEVAN RAWN, I think is his name. But he's got an interesting presentation on it, and he promotes it. But for overwintering, yeah, I think that the two boxes is better to have enough warmth in there, or have enough bees to have enough warmth and supplies.
So there's some information. I cannot remember where I found it, but there's some information that basically says it takes about 30,000 bees to manage a colony before it starts producing excess honey for the beekeeper. That's one of the reasons you don't want your hive to swarm, because if your 60,000 bee huge colony swarms and you've got 30,000 left, well, they're going to make enough for themselves, but not enough for you. And the beekeeper is in this business most likely for the honey. So that to me usually takes two boxes. Now the guys in Canada, one of the guys I follow up there, the Canadian beekeeper, he overwinters indoors. We cannot overwinter indoors here unless somebody's got a huge freezer unit that we can stick hives in. Up there, they can keep the temperature consistently below 40 degrees throughout a long winter. And even in the snow, he's starting to pull those hives out because he cannot afford a 50-degree day to occur while he's got those things in storage. But he does compress it. He's got 1,500 hives. He does compress those down to a single box. But here, again, the smart people out there say, let's take Dr. Marion Ellis, the retired entomologist from UNL. He does two deep brood boxes, and that's how he manages his brood also, is with two. So you can experiment with it, but all the smart people, and I shouldn't say all the smart people, it's the wrong way to say it, but the kind of the going way everybody's doing it is with two. But again, nothing prevents you from trying one. Just be careful on some swarming issues, because if she fills up the bottom box, remember, they bring the honey in and they deposit it and then they bring it up. So you're going to have honey issues in that bottom box, and you're going to have too much brood. And if you're not there making sure there's empty space, when that fills up, she's going to signal a swarm. And please, everybody else talk here. It doesn't just have to be 3 or 4 of us. This is an open conversation. Just unmute your mic.
And I see we have some new questions down towards the bottom too.
Yeah. I think we were down to Mike Cross's question. I don't know, Mike or Brad, you guys want to, I would tend to remove the bridge comb just to make it easier for me as a beekeeper, but I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah,
yes, I removed the bridge comb also.
Yeah, it's just a pain to deal with everything, because every time you open the box, you're gonna have to fight through that bridge comb, and some bees just do it.
So it looked like Terry was asking if everybody used screen bottom boards to help with varroa mites. That can be a whole another presentation. I use screen bottom boards in most of my hives, but it's more for ventilation, and I'm kind of rethinking that actually. But anyway, it's possible. It's certainly supposed to help with varroa mites. I've kind of been thinking more. Haven't done it yet. Haven't talked to anybody locally that uses them, but like the slotted bottom boards at the bottom that go underneath. There's probably a little bit of space. I'll let anybody else talk about screen bottom boards for helping with varroa mites.
I jumped on the screen bottom board wagon a few years ago, and now I kind of see that Well, from what I'm reading, most of the experts are saying it doesn't really help a whole lot. It makes you feel good because you see a few mites drop through, but in general, it's a very minuscule help, if anything at all. And then you have to deal with in the wintertime, then you want to make sure that's closed up, because then you have a lot more cold air coming in. So if I was to, as I make new hives, I'm going with solid myself, and looking at other ways to treat mites.
So does anyone use Slovenian hives? They've been also known as the AZ hive, and there says there's data showing good overwintering success. Ken, is that good overwintering success here in the Midwest, or where? I only know a little bit about them, not much.
Isn't that what you built, Mike?
So I have one that I have not used. Rhonda Cunningham, I believe. Rhonda Cunningham, if she's on, she has actually used those. The overwintering success may be because they're usually installed into a small structure, either a large or a small structure, which gets the heat from a lot of them to kind of gang together. So there's some advantages there that are supposed to be good, but the biggest thing, if you start looking at the Slovenian hive, is none of the equipment is standard. So if you're using a extractor, it may not, those frames may not extract in your extractor because it's not made for the Slovenian style hives. Some people have tried to put Langstroth type hives in a Slovenian setup. That has marginal success. So there's a lot to go over. And if anybody wants to have a conversation, please feel free to email me, and I'll give you the information that I have, that I've discovered. So.
I see there's a question from Bob Fisher that he's got a package that the queen doesn't seem to be building up very quickly. He's asking if anybody is raising queens that have mated queens available for sale yet. And he's got kind of a one-way, he can't answer back to us, but he's listening to us. You know, if you're on Facebook or you have access to the Omaha-Bee-Club Facebook page, that's a really good place to ask that question. And there's people that have queens for sale that I've seen reply before. Just because of the weather that we've had here the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's been pretty tough raising queens. I would think it's going to be at least a couple more weeks before you have locally raised queens available. But the Facebook place is probably going to be, the Facebook site is probably going to be your best place to ask that question. A lot of people, I'm raising some nukes. I don't sell queens separately at this point, unless I end up with some excess ones here. If you have another hive, if another package that's doing well and is far enough along, you could consider moving a frame of brood over and letting them raise a new queen too, or just removing your existing queen and letting them raise an emergency queen.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess the question is there, how many hives do you have? Yeah. So if it's a new beekeeper, you probably may only have one.
Yeah.
So I would let it go another week or two. You said it appears that she is laying. So if you're out there and you're seeing those, those open larvae, that means the queen is doing something. So just give her a little bit of a chance. As the hive starts to get stronger and stronger, the queen will start to lay faster and faster. That may or may not work, but you don't have a queen. So the last thing you want to do is break something you can't fix. It's better to have a weak queen than to have no queen.
And Mike, that's an excellent point. Just because the colony doesn't look that big now, what's really more important is what do your brood frames look like? Do you have large areas of kept brood? Because the package kind of goes through this transition where all the bees that came in your package die, and then the colony repopulates itself from the new eggs that the queen laid. So it takes a little while for that to happen. They're going to dip in size initially, and then they'll start growing back up. But if you have full frames of brood, larvae, and capped brood, definitely I would let them go for a while.
Yeah, I'm just rereading that too, Brad. He says one of the packages, so you must have multiple hives. So
yeah,
you could do your method as well.
And every hive's different. Some build up faster than others. Sometimes you just have to be a little patient. So another question on queen excluder from John's iPhone. What are your thoughts on using a queen excluder and then also have an upper entrance to the supers for the foraging bees? We kind of covered the queen excluder a little bit. Some people call them honey excluders because it seems like it limits your honey production, especially earlier in the season. I tend to side on with both Mike and Brad that kind of wait to see if you've got a queen laying up in there, and then maybe address that situation with a queen excluder if you want to clean out any brood out of your supers, because they'll emerge and then the bees will backfill with honey in those cells. An upper entrance to the super for the foraging bees, I think most of us do that. One thing to note is if your hive wants to exclusively use that upper entrance, they become very interesting to work with, because when you take that top box off that has the upper entrance, all of your returning bees are lost. They don't know how to get back in, and you're working your hive in a cloud of bees that are all they're not angry, they're just lost and flying around trying to find their way in. We had that happen on a couple hives this year, but I think most people like to maintain that upper entrance mostly for ventilation, I think.
So Ken Callicut's comments there were about that Slovenian hive. The successes were mostly in the eastern U.S., and now he's saying they sell a hybrid version that uses slingshot frames.
Terry asked if there's a local supplier for hive supplies. I have seen them at some of the farm supply stores like TSC and what's the other one?
Farm Guard.
Tractor Supply.
What I've seen at those, since they're a brick and mortar, they always they're going to pay a couple dollars more for those things. So if if you need something and you want to support local, go ahead and do that. Most of the shipping I've gotten from Dadant and places like that has been pretty quick too. But there's not a large amount around that I've seen, unless somebody else can speak up.
They have some at Tractor Supply, and there's Valhalla down in Lincoln.
Yeah, I bet Valhalla has quite a bit. All right, who else? Mike, you muted yourself.
Brad, you want to talk about laying workers?
Maybe Mike's talking to somebody. I don't like to talk about laying workers. That's just a tough situation. And I've seen a few posts on Facebook, some people dealing with it. There's a couple different ways of dealing with it. What I have had luck with is just every week put in a frame with young larvae from another hive, eggs and larvae from another hive. And usually by about the third week, they'll finally decide, oh wait, we need to raise a real queen. There's a pheromone that's produced from the actual fertilized larva that inhibits the worker bees from laying. So it takes 2 or 3 weeks of that pheromone to kind of shut down those laying workers. And then they'll say, oh wait, we've got larvae and we don't have a queen, so let's go ahead and raise an emergency queen. I know some other people will just take and shake everything out in front of the hive and let them repopulate. And I guess I don't know the point of that. Do you guys, is it mainly to hopefully those laying workers don't come back in?
Correct. Yeah. So when they get into laying mode, they're not going to have the desire to fly.
So if you take all your bees and shake them out, I don't know, 10, 15 feet in front of your hive and let them walk back in, that could get rid of that laying worker, but you still have a queenless hive that you need to put a new queen in. So the one problem with the laying worker is if you try to introduce a queen, it's pretty low success rate. The bees think they have a queen. They think it's one or more of those laying workers. So it's very difficult to introduce a queen to a situation like that.
So going back to Bob Fisher's packages, one of with the weak start from his queen, that might be a case where you can do the equalization stuff too that we talked about, and moving some of those brood frames from your stronger hive into that second one. And maybe it's not the queen that's the problem, is maybe they got a weak start somehow, or if a lot of the early bees died not long after getting installed from the package is possible. So you might try that, just kind of move some of those brood frames from your other hive and from the stronger hive into the weaker one to see if that boosts them up, and see how they do after that. So Terry was asking about the Aphame hives, or sorry, not Terry. C Bishop was asking about the Aphame hives. I've never seen one in person. What's the guy in Tennessee that's doing all the YouTube videos now? Cayman Reynolds. He has some videos about an Aphame hive. He has one. I don't know. I'm old fashioned. I like wood.
One of my friends down near Lincoln has one. He seems happy with it, but to me, yeah, when things get more complicated, I tend to steer more towards whatever is more simple.
So Chris Stark asked the question, if you're adding a second deep for brood box and moving 2 or 3 frames up, yeah, so this is kind of a checkerboarding thing. It does help to move a brood frame up because that forces the bees from the lower box to have a reason to go up to all those empty frames in the upper box. They will migrate toward brood. Even through a queen excluder, the nurse bees will go through to get to the brood to equalize the frame. So below, remember, comb is a beekeeper's best friend. So if you happen to have good deep comb, put it directly under. So you move a brood frame up and put a frame of drawn comb below it,
Okay.
or foundation if foundation is all that you have.
Okay.
And don't do like 3 in a row. Do every other one. If you're going to do 3, do every other one when you do that. Usually 1, maybe 2 is good enough.
Okay. Thank you.
And then one quick comment. Jack Nelson said that Matt Lance, who lives in Kearney, he's supposed to have queens available next week. So I've seen his comments on Facebook. So look at the Facebook pages, the Omaha-Bee-Club, I think he's commented there. But Matt Lance is his name. I've seen him talk about his queens. So if you need queens, he's a good contact that I know of.
So just some queen buying advice for people. It's very difficult for, unless somebody is a certified queen producer, either with either doing artificial insemination or that they've managed to have drone saturation where they can control the drone population. None of us probably ever have 100% Carnolian, Italian, or anything as far as queens, because once those new queens emerge and go out and mate, if they're open mating, who knows what kind of drone they're mating with. So just bear in mind, it's difficult to guarantee 100% of a certain type of race on a queen bee unless you're buying from a certified breeder. Mike Cross says very good presentation, and Brad, I thought you did an excellent job. I thought it worked very well. And Kay asked, did Lynn ever get on for the meeting? And his handle is Casper. I don't see Casper yet. So
yeah, I didn't see him came on. He called me a couple of times. So
yeah.
So I guess we'll defer. Let's see. Bob Lowry, do you have comments?
No, I don't have anything really. I know it was a great presentation. Did a very good job, Brad. And one thing I really wanted to say something here is all you new beekeepers in our club, we have all kinds of extracting equipment. We have 2-frame, 4-frame, 6-frame extractors. They're all hand crank. and hot knives and decapping tank. If you want to email me, I can make arrangements for you to pick it up at the apiary. We have a storage shed there. I'm available in about any time. I don't work, so.
Okay, Bob Cook, or no, Bob just walked away, so he wouldn't have to talk. So let's see. How about Charlotte? Is Charlotte on?
I know one thing, yesterday we did decide that we're not going to have a board meeting, so.
No, that's fine. That somebody had a question about paying dues. About 2 or 3 people had questions about actually paying dues that may not have paid before we all got social distance apart from each other. And so they were looking for the method of payment so we can get our dues paid.
I don't know. I don't have the exact address. You can mail your checks to the UPS mailbox on 84th and F. You can mail the check in there and I pick it up and give it to Bob Cook.
Okay, so there might be an address if we go to the Omaha-Bee-Club.com page.
Yes, there should be one in there. And once in a while, there's one shows up on Facebook.
Okay, yeah, we could possibly repost that again too. So
Right.
I know I'm remiss in getting my dues in too. So anybody else have questions? Please unmute your mic. This is supposed to be an open discussion.
Terry put another one in on chat there, Mike. You want to take that one?
Yeah, so it says, when you move bees from one hive to another, does it matter if they are different races? So are you combining, Terry, what your question, are you combining the bees?
Well, just with the discussion that you had, there was discussion about moving bees to equal out hives and things like that. I have 2 different races. I have 2 hives. One's Caroleans, one's Italian. Does it matter?
So you're saying if you're moving a frame of brood over,
Yeah.
and they emerge as Carnolians in an Italian hive, no, that does not matter. Now, eventually, the queen, after 9 weeks, everything will be replaced to whatever the queen is.
Okay.
So it takes 3 weeks for a nurse bee to emerge from an egg. So if you take a frame of Carnolians out and that Carnolian queen just laid an egg 2 minutes before you took that out, now you leave the bees behind, but you stick it into another hive. That last egg that she laid will take 3 weeks to emerge. And then as foragers, they will fly themselves to death in about 6 weeks. So in 9 weeks, all of that goes away, and it's just the new stuff produced by the queen that's in that hive. But as far as mixing, that's not a problem.
Okay. Thank
So,
you.
a couple things, Terry, that are interesting. If you're looking at your bees, you may notice that your worker bees have lots of different colorations.
Uh-huh.
Some are darker, some are lighter, more yellow, some maybe have a black butt. That's because the queen, they mate with 10, 15, maybe even up to 20 different drones, and those drones can be of different races. So what you've got in your hive is a real melting pot of races already. The one thing I have heard as far as a possible conflict on race, and I've only read this, is with Russian queens. They tend to smell, Russian bees, I guess, smell different than other bees for quite a bit. So it can be difficult to buy a Russian queen, introduce her into an Italian or Carniolan mixed hive, and vice versa. If you try and take a Carniolan queen and put her into a bunch of Russian worker bees, it might be more difficult. But that's the only one I've ever heard of.
Okay. Thanks.
I have tried to introduce a Russian queen to Italian, and I read you have to leave the queen caged up for 5 to 7 days longer to let the pheromone get into the hive. Otherwise, they'll ball her and kill her. But get back to your moving bees over. If you want to move some extra help with your weak hive, you leave nurse bees on your frame with your brood. You can spritz them with Honey Bee Healthy with that frame real quick and the hive and change the pheromone smell, and they won't bother each other.
Hey, Mike, there's a question in chat about VSH bees. You want to talk about those a little bit? Or VSH queens specifically? Has anybody tried them?
Yeah, so I've used VHS queens. They work well. I don't have a scientific result in Nebraska based on the mite loads, et cetera. I have not gone through the trouble to do shakes and do counts and run the numbers on them, but I was very successful. Now, in what I did in selling nukes this year and talking to a lot of people, I'm not trying to do this as an advertisement. It's more about the comments that were made. I had multiple people, probably a dozen people, tell me they lost every hive they had over the winter. And to every single person that asked that told me they lost every hive and they needed to order bees, the question I asked is, did you treat? And probably 12 out of 13 people said, no, I didn't treat. So my recommendation is that you treat, and even with VSH, even though it helps keep the numbers down, I still treat. I don't think it's a 100% solution. We as beekeepers are actually hurting ourselves by treating, but we can't afford to not treat, because the bee population would have to drop from 100% down to 2% and then spend several years recovering. So it's really not an option in our civilized society.
And the treating would be in the fall.
Sorry, go ahead.
And the treating then would be in the fall.
So no, I actually treat 3 times. I treat right before I put the honey supers on. Since there's brood in the box, something like a formic acid type treatment might be a consideration. You can use your favorite. You don't have to use these, but formic acid can be used with honey supers, but I don't like putting honey supers on anything that's a chemical. Formic acid comes in the form of Formic Pro and Mox, but there's Apivar and multiple other treatments out there that you can use, but you need something that either stays in the hive for a long period of time or penetrates through, because the mites are actually inside with the cap larvae. Those are the ones you're trying to kill also. So I do that in the spring before I put on the honey supers. I do something a second time in the late summer after I remove the honey supers. And then at Thanksgiving, when you start to look out and say, okay, this is going to be the last warm day, you're looking at the 10-day forecast, and this is going to be the last warm day, I do the dribble method with oxalic acid because there's very little brood left. That's why you're trying to wait until Thanksgiving in our area. That's about the point where it's still warm enough, the brood's gone away, and they're getting into that winter mode, and you want to just knock as many mites out as you can, and there's not a lot of place for them to hide at that point. So I actually treat 3 times. And again, your choice on what you treat with.
So with a new hive, I would treat in late summer. I don't need to do anything now.
I would do something before you put the honey supers on. So in a couple of weeks, as your boxes start to, as that second brood box, as it gets mostly full, that treatment's going to probably be on there depending on what you use for maybe up to 2 weeks. It may be a 1-part treatment, it may be a 2-part treatment or whatever, but just look at how much time it needs to be there. So right before the box gets too full, put it on. If it happens to be formic acid in the form of Formic Pro or Mox, the nice thing is if you look and you put that treatment on too late, there's nothing that prevents you from putting the honey super on. From what I've read, the USDA still considers the honey to be organic, even with the formic acid treatment on with the honey supers. Again, my preference is to pull the chemicals off before I put honey on. It's just, I just don't want to use a dirty spoon, right?
Yeah.
So, Terry, this is definitely one of those areas that there's hundreds of different answers from different beekeepers. I'll give you my perspective. It's a little bit different than Mike's. One thing I think is really important for beekeepers to do is to not just treat without knowing your mite levels. There's a couple different ways of monitoring your mite levels. The 2 most popular and considered reliable are the sugar roll method or the alcohol wash method. Because if you go do an alcohol wash and you've got nothing, then why put the chemicals into your hive? The other thing that from the research I've been doing the last couple of years, the most important time to treat for mites or to have a low mite population is during August and September. Because that's when your bees are raising the winter bees, and those are the ones that are tasked with living many months, not just 6 weeks. They have to live the whole winter. And if those bees are sick because of the viruses that are transferred by the mites, they won't make it through the winter. So if you want to minimize your chemicals, you know, beginning of August treatment should help you get healthy winter bees, and then monitoring to make even that decision too.
18 inches by 18 inches by 2 feet.
So not to drag it out too much more, and my answer is going to be pretty close to Brad's, since he's my bee mentor, so he's taught me a lot of what I know. But I think since your hives are the first year, I don't think you need to be too worried about doing any type of treatment before you put your honey supers on this year. But like Brad was saying, I think now is the time that you probably need to be learning how to measure your mite loads. And personally, I would suggest the alcohol wash, although it feels kind of cruel because you end up killing some of those bees. But if you think of your honeybee colony as the colony as an organism, then it's not so bad.
Did
But
you get packages, Terry?
Pardon?
Did you get packages or nukes?
Packages, two packages.
So a lot of people that provide packages, they will spray those packages with oxalic acid to give them a mite treatment before they sell them. In this case, you're starting with a very low mite load. But I don't know. I mean, whoever you bought your package from, you could ask them if they did that. But you really don't know how, you know, they could have delivered you a package that was just chock full of mites too. You know, so it's hard to tell. You won't know until you monitor.
Yeah, they're from Valhalla bees.
Does anybody have experience buying from them to know if they spray their packages or not?
And they get their stuff from California.
Okay.
I think learning how to count your mites is where you need to be.
Okay, I have one more question. I know I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm monopolizing time, but so what I've read is that I shouldn't put a honey super on this year, that I should just let them build up their stores so that they're strong for winter.
That's what I did my first year of beekeeping. But you kind of just got to keep an eye on your hive and see what you think. I'm sorry, that's not a better, more definitive answer.
Okay.
So you put the honey super on based on how full the bottom boxes are. So as a beekeeper, remember your objective is to keep them from doing what they do naturally, which is swarm. That's how they evolved over the last 100 million years is, you know, that's how, you know, we have multiple kids and we make more and more population. They do splits and make more and more bee population. But if they split, you're not going to get any honey from that hive. So if you're trying to keep your hive from splitting and there's no place to put honey except down in the brood chamber, the queen is going to say, I'm brood and honey bound. There's no place to lay an egg. She's going to signal a split, or signal a swarm, sorry, right? And now you've got a swarm on your hands. And now that 30,000 bee colony that you didn't think you could get past 30,000 bees, half of it's going to leave. And now you're going to have a 15,000 bee colony. So if you put a honey super on and they can move the honey up, then the colony can get bigger and stronger. If they don't fill the honey super, they don't fill the honey super.
Okay.
So,
and just as a general comment, usually when you start with a package, the first year, you probably don't have to worry about swarming because they're really just trying to build up as long as you let them grow into the extra boxes like Mike said. If you make it through the winter, next spring, hold on because they're going to just explode on you. And they're most second year queens or second year colonies, they're really going to build up hard and want to swarm on you then. So keep Brad's presentation around for next spring.
Yeah.
So if you have a nook though, would it be the same then? Where a nook would be more advanced and wouldn't it have more opportunity to have honey in it then?
It could. I mean, you're starting ahead of the game with a nuke because they've got some frames of brood and the queen's already laying in there. So you're going to be 3 or 4 weeks ahead of a package. And again, there's some timing to it, like Brad said, depending upon what the weather's like, what the nectar flow is like. Even a nuke, I think you're going to be into July before you fill 2 brood boxes completely. But you know, I got some honey off of my hives the very first year, and they were packages, but it was just a really good year for honey. So it just depends. You just have to really watch your bees and try and do what they're telling you to do.
Okay.
So listen.
So Kay asked a question. I have a 2x2x2 bucket of crystallized honey. Any suggestions besides not letting it happen again? So Kay, if you have a method of warming that honey up Okay, so we're talking about warming it, not boiling it, but warming the honey up to about 110 degrees, maybe a little bit more than that. That honey will turn back into a liquid. If you make it too hot, you're going to start destroying the goodness of the honey, the enzymes and other stuff that's in the honey. But you may be able to take a spoon and spoon it into quart jars, and then just getting some warm water on the stove. Ideal in 5-gallon buckets. And when it happens to me, I've got a whole bunch of sheets of styrofoam that I've got a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot container I build out of 2-inch thick styrofoam, and I've got light bulbs in there and a thermostat, and I let it sit there for about 3 days in a 5-gallon bucket. And even in the end, there's still always a little bit left in the bottom, but it reliquefies when that happens.
I'll give one other option for that. I do a lot of cooking on the side, and I have a device called a sous vide. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but basically it will heat water up to a very specific temperature for cooking meats and steaks and whatnot. So I can fill my sink full of water, put my sous vide device in there, and you can get them for about $100 these days. And I can make that water temperature exactly 110 degrees. And then I set my 5-gallon bucket of crystallized honey in there, and in a few hours, it's completely decrystallized.
Oh, that's cool.
It's SOUSVIDE. And if that's the best way to cook steaks, in my opinion. So look them up.
I bought a heater band. You put around a 5-gallon bucket from Dayton, and it only gets about 106 to 110 degrees. And it for a fully crystallized 5-gallon bucket, it takes about 6 to 7 hours by constant spooning, stirring it to liquefy.
Yeah. It also depends on what kind of flowers your bees are getting nectar from. I'm not well versed in this at all. I wish Dr. Ellis was online. But
Yeah,
there's flowers, the nectar will crystallize almost immediately. In fact, they'll even crystallize on the comb. So sometimes you can't help it. It's wherever your bees got their nectar.
Yeah, the crystallization is controlled by the ratio of glucose and fructose, the two sugars that are in honey. The honeys that are high in glucose, like sunflower and cotton, will granulate very quickly. The honeys that are higher in fructose remain liquid a lot longer.
Wow, I didn't know that, Marion.
I got a question about mites. Has anybody ever tried using plastic frames at all, first of all? And second of all, they had plastic frames that had larger cells specifically for raising boy bees, and evidently the mites had tendency to lay their eggs in those because they hatch at a different rate. Anybody tried those? I've heard of them. I've seen them in the dance store. They were green.
Yeah, so those are called drone comb frames. And
Yeah.
I bought a couple of them. I've never used them for that purpose, other than just as a spacer in my hive. And one thing I've noticed is that the bees seem to be reluctant to even draw the comb on those frames, so they might need to get re-waxed. But the theory is, yes, you're correct. The mites do tend to prefer drone larvae or drone comb because they can reproduce more because the drones have a longer cycle before they emerge from their cells. So if you can get a frame that's all drone brood, while it's capped, you can pull that drone comb out and freeze it, kills all the mites, and then put it back in the hive, and they'll go through that whole process again. You could also just look for regular frames that you have on your hive that are all drone comb, and if it's mostly drone, you could freeze it. If it's only partially, you could just scratch those drone cells open and expose them, and so then the mites would be exposed, and a lot of the immature ones wouldn't survive. In general, it's a very good organic technique. However, most people can't really attain complete mite control with that. You're going to help, but you're probably not solving the entire problem. You guys want to agree, disagree with me?
I I was just say, I think that's just one part of like the whole integrated pest management. We talked a little bit about screen bottom boards in there. We talked about VSH queens. We talked about the drone comb. That's just one of many things in addition to the actual treatments and stuff that were discussed a little bit as well. It's a
What are
comprehensive.
these queens you're talking about?
Sorry, I think if I heard the question right, it's about the VSH queens, which are Varroa sensitive hygiene queens, and I'll let Mike talk to him more than he knows more about it than I do, so maybe I should let him talk.
So Marla Spivak from University of Minnesota identified and propagated a set of bees that are considered to be hygienic bees. So the general idea is that either the workers or the workers, which could be nurse bees, they can sense the undercap brood that there's a problem with the brood. There's something wrong with it, and they'll chew the cap open, and they will take the defective brood out of the hive and they'll throw it out. So larvae with mites on it are defective brood. So what they wind up doing is they'll chew it open and they'll pull it out and get rid of the larvae. And in doing so, there's 4 developing mites that get thrown out the door with it that are attached to that piece of brood. Okay, so that doesn't do 100%, but again, it does help keep the population down. And so they're now called Varroa sensitive hygiene, and there's a testing thing that they go through when they develop the breeder queens, artificial insemination, some other stuff. But again, it's just one of the methods to naturally try and keep the mite population down.
Okay, I heard about those being developed, but I've been out of beekeeping for about 10, 12 years, so.
I don't think there's any magic bees, to be honest. There's going to be some that will help you in your cause, but right now, I don't think there's any bee that's 100%. You can just leave them in a box and not worry about mites at all. They're all going to get you at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just noticing in the chat, we missed a question earlier. I don't know if the person's still on, but about the best way of supplying water. They've seen different ideas using wood pieces or sponges to allow them to rust safely. Anybody want to talk to the best way to water your bees?
Well, they don't like a nice clean water fountain or waterfall kind of thing. They like, I noticed in my backyard, they like to go sip the water from little bits of dirt and organic matter in between rocks and stuff. You know, they're not actually just on a pool of water. It seems like they're also attracted to swimming pools for some reason. I think I've heard it's some of the scent of the chemicals. But yeah, you want to provide them the ability to climb out so that they don't fall in there and drown. So if you are providing water and you can put something like that in there, that'd be good. Some people use a pile of rocks and in the bottom of some sort of container, and then you can keep some water in there so the bees can go down the surface of the rock, sip at the water, and then fly off.
One of the things I used for fluorescent light fixtures. They had this little 1/4-inch grid of open hole plastic grid that were used for 4x8 light fixtures, and I'd take a piece of that and float it in the water, and that gave them a place to land and be able to draw the water without having to worry about getting too wet. And
can you still buy those in the hardware store?
Bees landing on it, taking water. So
can you still buy those in the hardware store, Patty? I haven't seen them.
I don't know. Like I said, I've been out of it for about 10, 12 years. So.
That sounds like a good idea.
Kay asked about using bananas in hives. Is that to catch Varroa, Kay?
He's muted.
Anybody use bananas in their hives?
Okay.
I ran into a situation where I've got laying worker hives, and it's always been told to me, and I ran into a guy on the weekend that knows another old-time beekeeper that uses bananas in every one of his hives when he gets them ready for winter time. And my question was, well, what do they do? And they said they just eat everything. They eat the peel, they eat the banana itself. And I used them in the layer worker hive. Just did it the other day, because they always say if you're going to go out with your bees and you're going to snack on something, you don't snack on a banana because it's going to give them the scent of the queen. So I want to change that pheromone base in there, like Brad was talking about. And so I just put in banana peel and a little piece of banana. I just wonder if anyone else had ever done anything strange and weird with them. And I'm Tom, not Kay.
I have not done that.
Yep. But you've heard about don't eat a banana when you go out to check your hives, haven't you?
I think I have heard that's one of the scents they like. Yeah. I would tell you the main thing when you go out to your hives is don't let your partner beekeeper go bang on the hives before you open them. That
No.
Problems.
Yeah. and don't smoke them if you're in a hurry, because if you lift that lid up, if you already smoked them, they're already getting agitated and you really don't have a sense as to what's going on in there. And if you just open up the lid and listen, if it's quiet, move on.
Yeah.
If it's noisy, you might have an issue.
So maybe just a couple comments from people. We had some nice participation today, 40 to 49 people at times. I was personally glad we were able to have our meeting. I'm guessing by next month we'll still need to do a Zoom meeting versus an in-person meeting, although I can't speak for that. Did this work well for everybody? Did you like it? Was it something you would do instead of coming to the meeting or in addition to coming in person if you couldn't make it? Do you have other things you want to see or hear or get talked about? I'll open that up for feedback, or if you want to, we've got an email address that Brad put up earlier called askomaha-beeclub@gmail.com. Or you can put it in the chat here or just speak up now. Yeah, so askomaha-beeclub@gmail.com.
Just went away.
I think feedback would be really good on this, and maybe we need to do more of this in the future.
I thought it was a terrific presentation, and to be able to because I live northwest of Omaha, a little over an hour, it's a nice way to connect and ask questions from people that are really good experts at this. Especially as a new beekeeper, you have a great resource here.
Stupid thing flips over every now and then.
I'd like to add, Brad, I forgot earlier. Lynn and we have opened the teaching apiary on the first and third Saturday from 1 to 3. So if all the new beekeepers would like to come and get their hands into the hives, that's what we've got. That's the purpose of it, to learn and look at the problems we have out there or whatever.
And is that normally published on the Facebook site too, Bob, when that's going to happen, or how do people find out about it?
Well, we'll have to get it on Facebook, but and the .com, the regular Bee Club, yeah.
Maybe it might be
we just did it. Started yesterday. With that, we kind of made this decision last week, and so we just started yesterday again. So I thought I'd just put it out there.
Where is that located?
That's Bohemian Cemetery. It's at 52nd and Center. It's clear on the back side of the cemetery.
So when you drive in the entrance, you basically start heading south, and you go past all the used part of the cemetery, and you'll be on kind of a rough, bumpy little gravel road, and you'll be driving along some trees and see a little opening there. And are people parking outside the trees, Bob?
Yes. Mm-hmm. When you first come into the cemetery, you'll come to a Y. You want to take the left-hand Y, not the right one. You'll wind up in through the other old part of the cemetery. If you take the left and go up over the hill, you'll come to a circle, go down there on the gravel road.
I know a lot of people usually have questions on this. Maybe we can see if we can get that on the website on the front page with some directions and times and locations, and also on the Facebook page. I don't know if we want to send an email out or not on those too. I guess you don't want too many people too. How many people do you normally get, Bob?
Well, yesterday we had 4.
Yeah.
which I was really surprising with us not putting it out. A lot
What
of
was that?
times we're up to 12, 15 sometimes.
What time is that again, Bob?
From 1 to 3 on the first and third Saturday of every month.
Great, thanks.
And Lynn's got a key to the padlock on the poo hive. If people want to look in there, or anybody has special interest, I can show up for that too.
And we have different. We have two different. We have Langstroth hives out there, and we have top bar hives, and that's about it. We have what? We got 19 hives out there now. That's not counting yours, Brad, but.
Mine's a casket anyhow, according to Lynn.
Yeah. According to Lynn, yours is a coffin.
So Bob Cook, when we went around to the different people on the board, did you have anything to say to the group at large?
No, I don't think so, Mike. Good meeting. Nice participation. Good presentation, Brad.
Thanks.
So we'll obviously be looking for somebody to do a presentation. I'm not sure if something's lined up yet or not. If you have ideas for presentations, whether you're able to give that presentation or just a suggestion where you're looking to be informed on something, again, please let us know at that ask-omaha-beeclub@gmail.com. The other thing that somebody mentioned is, can we do this when we start meeting together again at the extension office? And the plan is to try and do that. It'll be interesting the first time trying to figure out how to get the additional equipment hooked up, since we tend to struggle a little bit just getting the laptop connected to the screen. This will just add one more layer of complexity to it, but I think we'll slowly figure that out, so people that are reaching from afar, they'll be able to join us during the meeting. So we'll have to figure out the ins and outs of how to make that work. But for now, again, next month, plan on it being this way unless we're told otherwise.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll comment quick. This is a nice alternative to meeting in person, given the situation we have right now. But in the long run, I think meeting in person is better. For one thing, Zoom limits the conversation to one conversation at a time, or if we're all meeting together in the room, there'd be 2 or 3 conversations going on during the general discussion time.
Yep.
For the next meeting, will somebody put out an email for the ID and the password? Is that how you get on there?
You should have gotten one if you're on the B-Club.
Yeah, I think I did, but I deleted it.
Ah,
But it'll come around again next time?
yeah.
Okay.
Job well done.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Nothing else heard. Thank you, and we'll see you either at the Bohemian Cemetery or here next month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Hey, Mike.
I'm still on.
Yeah, I want to hook up with you later.
Okay, there. I've got you. Okay.
Yeah, I worked at you when we were testing the other day, and I know how to cure. I don't know why my name is only partial and it's not showing all of it. And there's a way to take care of that. And I want to deal with that on you.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Ken. I'm just looking for when bees would be available.
Yeah, let me give you a call. They should be here very shortly. I was hoping to take a look at them today, but it's been terribly cold all day. So I just want to make sure that the last couple of hives that we get out will have the bees that you want.
Yeah, my cell phone is in op, so I might need to call you. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That or do you have email that works?
Yeah, and I have email that works too.
Okay, so either email or call me. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And thanks, Brad. I may want to bring some of my brood boxes over from the hive that died and just see what I can salvage.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, talk to you later, Ken. I'll send you an email.
Okay, let's see. Tom, where did Tom go? He was here a second ago. How'd we lose him?
What's Tom?
Oh, there. KJRIRE.
That's me. That's Ken
Hey, me.
Gurley.
Oh, it's Ken. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, my screen's got so many people still on it that it's shifting back and forth here. So sorry.
I didn't know if you had access to your, you're hosting the Zoom here. If you had access to your, like your settings.
Yep, and in the settings, it says allow participants to rename themselves.
Yes.
I did not have that checked.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't. It is now checked?
It is now checked. So can you rename yourself?
Let me take a look here. Yeah, there we go.
I thought I had that checked at some point, but maybe I thought that was, maybe I saw the negative of that.
Oops. I don't know if there's a, I don't know if there's a way to like save this for like another Zoom session, or just how that works. And I've yet to figure out why my name, only a portion of my name, showing up there. But anyway, that's me. I did have a question. I didn't know if it pertained here or not, but does anybody know how long you can have a queen inside of a cage, or how long she will stay?
I've accidentally had them in there for weeks before. At some point, again, I don't know the data behind how long they'll be until they're damaged, but I think there's kind of a rule of thumb that 2 weeks is probably a margin you don't want to really go past.
So if you have the queen cage inside the hive, and the bees have basically accepted her, they're not trying to glom on and kill her, do they then transfer nutrients, water or whatever it is, through the screen to the nurse bees that are inside the cage, and then they in turn, take care of the queen? Or how does that work?
Yes, and I can prove that because I took a whole string of queen cages and I had the screen facing the wrong direction, and I actually squeezed them between 2 frames of brood where the bees could not get to the screen, and overnight every single one of those queens died. And all I had to do is rotate the screen where it was exposed, and every single queen would have been fine.
Okay.
So
I was kind of wondering about that. I had a hive that was queenless, and so I ordered a queen, and because of I don't know if it's coronavirus, the mail delivery is quite a bit slower these days, and I was really concerned about whether she would arrive alive or not. And then I thought, in putting her into the hive, which I did immediately, I was wondering if she was in like a weakened state already, if the bees on the outside of the screen would be able to pass, nutrients or whatever onto her, and take, keep her alive till they actually chewed through the candy and let her out. So
yeah. So your queen probably came with attendants.
Yes.
Was there a handful of bees on the outside of the cage when you received it?
Say that again.
Did you have attendant bees? In other words, were there nurse bees that came with your queen?
They were, but they were on the inside with her.
Okay, and none on the outside.
No, there was. I mean, this was through the mail, so there was, probably.
No. When I order 100 queens at a time, I'll have the attendants will actually be on the outside. So they put some water. They put a sponge to hold some water, and then they're good. In that state, they're good for a day or two.
Yeah, I just had the one queen, and so it was the attendants that were with her were obviously inside with her. And when I put the cage into the hive, right away the bees come up and kind of, you know, climbing all over the cage and which is normal. And I didn't know at what point when they start to, I guess, accept her, would they still be able to transfer stuff through the screen before they, you know, chewed her out of the cage is what I was wondering.
Yeah, so yeah, they feed her right through that cage very successfully, and they can do that for several weeks, or at least a couple of weeks.
Okay. Good session. I enjoyed it.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kill the conference, and we'll see you in a month.
Okay, thank you.